doing a hybrid meeting. There are a group of people here with us in Salem, Oregon at the Ag Building, and then several folks joining us virtually on the team meeting. So we're going to just wait a minute or two. We still have some folks getting registered to come in. So if you could hang on just for about 1 minute, we'll get started here. All right, thanks.
Sounding pretty efficient.
Move that just a little bit more.
So yeah, we're live here in the room, Tom, through the meeting and everything. So.
Yeah. Just like on TV.
And I am recording.
Did that make any difference? Yeah, okay, good.
All right, just a note for everybody that we are recording this meeting, so there'll be a digital audio as well as a video recording. Or is it just digital audio? Christy, you know?
It'll be video.
Okay,
We do have digital, but I'll probably just put video on because.
all righty. So I think we'll go ahead and get started again. I'm Wynn Matthews, the program manager with the confined animal feeding operations and fertilizer programs here at ODA. And this is the October 13th, 2022 CAFO Advisory Committee meeting. It's our last meeting for calendar year 2022. We're doing a hybrid. I'm sorry. Yeah, if folks in the virtual space could make sure you mute yourself, that would be great. And why don't we start with folks in the virtual space introducing themselves. So I have a list here. I'll go down that list. And folks could introduce themselves. That would be great. Jennifer.
Yeah, good afternoon. Jennifer Cruikshank, Oregon State University Extension.
Hey, good afternoon, Jennifer. Heather. DQ.
Hi, everyone. This is Heather Kwapamaki in Air Quality Planning with DEQ.
All right, thanks for joining us today, Heather. Zach from DEQ.
Hi, everybody. Zach Loboy. I am the current interim permit and program development manager at DEQ.
All right, thank you, Zach. Megan. All right, how about McKendra? Hopefully I'm pronouncing your name right.
Yep, sorry. My name is McKendra Morin, and I'm with Food and Water Watch.
Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Pat. All right, how about Noosh from DEQ?
Hi there, Noosh Puya from DEQ. I'm also, as Zach is, in the permitting and program development group.
All right, thank you for hanging out with us this afternoon. Starla.
Hello, I'm Starla. I'm here from SIO, sitting in. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate you joining us. Tammy Kerr.
Good afternoon, Tammy Kerr, Oregon Dairy Farmers Association.
All right, thanks, Tammy. Tammy Jenny.
Good afternoon. This is Tammy Denny, Oregon Cattlemen's Association.
All right, and Tara.
Hi, this is Tara Heinzen with Food and Water Watch.
All right, so we have some folks in the room. Thanks to those on the phone for introducing yourself. So we'll start with you, Mr. Lidholm.
And this is Old Tillamook Dairy Farmer. Hi, I'm Allie Studnick. I am with ODA. I'm the new inspector for Area H, which is a hybrid position, which I'll be doing admin work and inspecting.
Tom Thompson, Northwest Ag Consulting.
Amanda Sweeney, office specialist for CAFO department.
Christy Caldwell, CAFO program analyst.
All right, so you heard a few new names. Allie and Amanda have joined us recently. And so Amanda is taking over where Janet Short left off. She'll be doing all the work that Janet did. And so this is her first advisory committee meeting. So she'll be working to get the minutes together, get those sent out when we're done with this. And so if you see an email from her, you'll know what that's about with ODA. And then as Allie Studnick said, she's our new inspector that has a hybrid role, the first time we've done this. And so about 50% of her work is inspecting, and so she'll get a book of facilities to inspect. And then also to assist other inspectors when you have a sampling activity that requires extra hands, or large facilities that just require a little extra help to get the work done out there. And then also she's going to be helping with the administrative part of the program, which is permit drafting, permit reviewing, response to comments, public noticing. Those administrative activities have just gotten larger over the years and take a lot more program time. So Allie's been with us about 3 months now, and Amanda about 2, and really happy to have both of them on board and working with our team to get them up to speed. So if you're out in the field, you may see Allie doing inspections, and if you're here in the office, Amanda will be around keeping our file straight and our correspondence going in and out like it should. All right, so item 2 is our minutes from last time. Just to remind everybody that we record the meetings, and we don't take written minutes. We just use the recording as the record for the meeting. I don't know if anybody had a chance to review it, and if you have comments, corrections, or additions from that activity, you can let me know. I'll give folks a few minutes here to respond. If I don't hear anything and you think of something later, you can email that into Amanda or Christy, and we'll get that noted. So any corrections, additions, or subtractions? All right. So not hearing anything from that, and again, feel free to reach out to us if you think of something after you review it. We'll take that into account. The 140 item is to talk about the poultry CAFO work group in the Senate Natural Resources Committee. And so the committee is Senate Interim Committee on Natural Resources and Wildfire Recovery. Isaac couldn't join us today. He's over in Eastern Oregon. Another activity cropped up that he needed to attend to. And so I can fill in the blanks on that. So this committee was started at the end of the session, at the regular session in 2022, and met for 5 different times. One of the meetings was to take public input. And as Senator Dembro, who chaired the committee, described during the public comment period, it's not a formal public comment period. It's the committee wanting to know what members of the public and stakeholders had to say about the activity. And so the group did receive a large number of comments through that process. The group, also looked at several different, listened to several different agencies talk about their role in permitting poultry CAFOs from a water quality standpoint, from an air quality standpoint, and from a water quantity standpoint. So 3 different agencies provided input on that. So the group has ended its work. I'm not sure that there will necessarily be a report. I think there were minutes and attendance taken during the activity, but I'm not sure that there'll be necessarily a report coming out of there. But ODA did participate in all the meetings and provided information as requested. So, one thing that could come out of this activity would be legislation that may surface in the next legislative session that will start in late January, early February of 23. That's a long session, and it's also a budget session. I don't believe that at least ODA at this point has any to-do items left in that, from that work group, and essentially are, have wrapped up our work there. But I'm sure there'll be continued, conversations that come out of the work that was done at that group. Yeah, Zach, I don't know if you have any. I know DEQ participated in that group as well, kind of at the time of the transition when you were coming in. I don't know if you have any comments to add to that or not.
Yeah, Wim, I don't think I have any comments on that. That was kind of right as I transitioned into my new interim role.
Okay. Well, I just say that I thought it was a really robust discussion, and the group did get perspectives from, from all corners there. And yeah, we'll just wait and see what comes out of that. Like I say, there could be legislation, there could be several different activities that that result from that work group. Anybody else have comments on the work group? Attended, provided comments to it?
Just one question: if there's no report that comes out of there, then how would you know what? There would be a summary of findings, maybe, or something, some way of knowing what transpired.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Tom. I'll have to check, because I'm not, just because I don't have a to-do in front of me to do that summary work. I'm not sure that there is one. There might be. So let me do some checking, and if there is, I'll send something out to this group that expect a report, or there will be a summary of activities. I do know that at the last meeting, Senator Dembro did orally summarize and gave each member a chance to discuss what they thought of the activity, number one, and if they had plans going forward, what those might be. So I know there was an oral, that's probably in the record, and that may be the summary.
Yeah, because without some kind of written format to know what they thought of it, then you don't know which direction they're going to head.
Right.
So it's nice to have a forewarning, I guess. Yeah.
Right. And then again, the discussion, the topics were all centered around, large poultry, confined animal feeding operations. And the media that was looked at were like water quality, air quality, and water quantity were the three main. There was some discussion about public health. But I would say that the three previous items were the ones that had the most discussion around.
And there's a corollary question to that. So whatever the legislature finds out from that, would they maybe stick with only requirements for poultry, or expand that to all CAFOs?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'm not sure how that might go. I mean, clearly this was entitled poultry,
right?
But I think some of the issues that were brought up are cross-cutting to other species.
Yeah.
So, anybody else in the group have thoughts, questions, or want to weigh in on the work group? All right, not hearing any, I'll move to the next item, which is a petition that the Environmental Quality Commission received to look at CAFO dairy air permitting. And there are some other petitions. I actually probably will replace the word petition with a lawsuit that we received after we made this agenda. I'll go ahead and start with the EQC dairy air quality permitting petition. And Heather from DEQ is joining us. I know she's working with the EQC and leading the charge among DEQ staff to put together information for the commission so that they can make a decision on this petition. So essentially, it was asking the commission to require some kind of regulatory activity for large dairies to control air quality. And a lot of the things in the petition are directly out of the Dairy Air Task Force report that was issued in 2008-ish timeframe. So a lot of the work that we've been doing is, pulling up the task force report and bringing the commission members up to speed on what that is, what's in there, right, and what transpired to get the parties to that point at that time. And then also look at the current status of EPA's National Area Emissions Monitoring Study, which was ongoing at the time we had the Dairy Air Quality Task Force and its final report to the legislature. And as the agencies asked for funding to implement that report, I guess one of the conditions that's still the same is EPA is still working to complete the National Area Emissions Monitoring Study. And it has moved further down the road, but it's definitely not complete yet. So that's part of the conversation. And Heather, I don't know, do you have anything you want to add about process? I know the EQC has some process. They're reaching out to the public for comment, and there'll be a special meeting of the EQC.
Yeah, that was about all that I was going to add there, Wim, is the petition is currently out for public comment. So if anybody would like to comment on that, please do. I can share with you the link to that site. And we have not scheduled the meeting with EQC yet, but there will likely be the week of November 7th. That's TBD. There will be a notice that goes out once that gets scheduled.
Okay, great. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Wim.
So, yeah, you're welcome. So, so the agencies are working together to provide the information the EQC is requesting so that they can make a decision on the petition. The other petition that I turned into a lawsuit is that ODA is not sure if it's been served yet or not, so we're still trying to figure that out. But there was a lawsuit filed in Lynn County against ODA and DEQ, asking the judge there to review the decision that the agencies made to issue a permit for a new large poultry facility called JS Ranch. And the petitioners alleged, that the agencies overlooked several things, issued the wrong permit, among other things. And so once we get the complaint in its entirety, we'll go ahead and work with our attorneys from the DOJ Trial Division to develop a response to that and start working through that process. I think all the other petitions that were facing the agency on CAFO facilities have been responded to, so I don't think that we have outstanding petitions to respond to that are directed at ODA at this particular point. And the most recent petitions that we responded to, we denied either because of a timeliness issue or what's the word I'm looking for? Didn't feel that they were pertinent to the activity that we undertook in issuing a permit or transferring a permit from one facility to another. So we are kind of current with that, but we'll be working on this lawsuit and working with our partners DEQ, both on that lawsuit and the EQC.
Lawsuit?
The lawsuit was filed by a group of environmental NGOs. Yeah. Willamette River Keeper among them, Friends of Family Farms, Farmers Against Foster Farms is a separate group. And there's another list. I don't have the whole list, but once we get that, we can make that public.
If the lawsuit, what happens to the entity that's going to be the chicken facility? Do they have to stop on hold then, or can they kind of continue along?
Yeah, that's a good question, Tom. Not 100% sure at this time because I want to make sure our legal group has a chance to take a look at it. Yeah. One of the questions is the agencies issued the wrong permit. So if that was upheld and we did issue the wrong permit, then we'd have to reissue a different permit. So it just depends on what the outcome
would be.
Right. Yep. Any questions, comments on agency involvement there? All right. So moving along to the next item, which is CAFO inspection protocol in endemic high path avian influenza era. So I was corrected by our state vet, and currently we're not able to use the word endemic to describe high path AI. Even though it's behaving that way, it hasn't met enough FDA and other legal milestones to be really described as that kind of activity. But what we do know is that this year in 2022, we had high path AI detections in Oregon in months that we have never seen them before, ever in the history of the disease. We've never had a case after June. We had cases in July, in September. We had 5 cases in July, so it wasn't just 1 or 2. It was a lot of cases in July and cases in September. Other states are already reporting cases, so it's in the flyway and will likely, be other cases here in Oregon. I wanted to take a minute and just make sure everybody is aware kind of the transmission pathway, right? So this disease originates in wild birds, does not originate in commercial birds or backyard birds. It starts in wild birds, is spread by wild birds, and then infects backyard birds or commercial birds by contact. And so a lot of backyard birds, if they're out in the yard or in their chicken run or duck run, it's a pretty direct contact where a wild bird can fly in and the duck can land in your duck pond and mingle with your backyard ducks and then leave and pass the disease on that way. The other thing is if Canadian goose carry it as well. And so if you're walking in the park and step in Canadian goose droppings and then go home in your backyard chicken enclosure, you likely could carry the disease in that pathway. Currently, there's not been any infection in commercial flocks in Oregon. There were a couple quarantines because non-commercial flocks sold products, right? Either meat, birds, or eggs to neighbors. And because there's that trend, trade transaction, the agency has to consider a quarantine. But all of the infected premises in Oregon were non-commercial flocks. And the response of the state vet and FDA is to depopulate those animals once they're confirmed positive. There's a 2-test requirement, and once they're tested and confirmed, then it's depopulated. So what ODA has done, the CAFO program wise, throughout the years with high path AI is whenever there's been an outbreak in the region, right? Not even necessarily in Oregon, but just in the region, our state vet informs us. And we paused inspection on poultry facilities just to make sure that we weren't a vector to move disease into them while we were doing an inspection. And that has worked okay because it's usually late winter, early spring, and into late spring, maybe even early summer, where you're not inspecting for a few months, but then there's a window to go back and inspect for 6 or 8 months before the disease comes back into the region again. And there's some years where there's no disease detections here. So this year is very different from any year that we've experienced before. And so we're working with our state vet to come up with an enhanced protocol over and above our existing biosecurity so that we can do inspections on these facilities because we can't not inspect because high path AI may be here forever. I would say that there are, Ryan does tell us, our state vet, that there is a vaccine, there's a vaccine for it. It's kind of like the flu vaccine, where they collect strains every year. They create a vaccine based on what's traveling in the wild bird population and create a vaccine. I don't think it's widely available, is what my understanding is. Now, that may be changing, right? If it's here often, there may be a boost to push out a lot of vaccine and then have people use that as a tool if they'd like to. So that does exist. It's just not been widely used. And late 21 and early 22, there were several million commercial facility depopulations in the East Coast and the Midwest, from high path AI. So knock on wood, Oregon hasn't had that yet in the commercial flock. But we want to make sure that it doesn't happen. So just to review a little bit of this draft plan, there are 36 poultry CAFOs in Oregon right now. 12 of them are egg producers and the remaining 24 are broiler chickens. We try to inspect them once every 10 months. And we have an existing biosecurity protocol of disinfection of our clothes, our bodies, our clothes, and our vehicles and any instruments we use before we go on the site and after we come off the site, to control spread of infectious diseases. We also coordinate with our state veterinarian on this protocol all the time and change it as we need to accommodate what's going on out in the livestock world. So we've got this new challenge with these several high path AI cases and almost continuous detections, and they've been in the hottest, driest months of the year. We're still getting detections. So we've got 11 bullets on here. I'll just go down through and read them. This is still a draft facility or a draft document because I need to have Dr. Scholes approve it. He's reviewed and edited a couple times. I think we're pretty close, so I can go ahead and present what we have now. So number one, our inspectors that inspect poultry facilities do not own poultry themselves, right? They don't have their own backyard birds. We observe a 72-hour interval between conducting any type of poultry inspection. And that's based on FDA, how the disease moves and how it persists. Ryan and his group have started a weekly, and this is published more frequently if there's active quarantines or outbreaks going on, but he's doing a weekly briefing to all the partner agencies, FDA and others, USDA and others here in the state, and the producers, and we're part of that briefing setup. So we review that, and then if there is an outbreak or quarantine, there'll likely be a daily briefing on the what's going on, where is it at? Is there a quarantine? Where is it at? So we would not inspect any facility in a quarantine area during a quarantine. There's supposed to be no bird movement. Well, we wouldn't add people movement to that. And we would set up a 5-mile perimeter around the quarantine site and not inspect any facilities within 5 miles of the quarantine boundary. So if the quarantine was a county, we go an additional 5 miles outside of that boundary and then potentially look at them. Definitely wouldn't inspect a site with an active high path disease detection or quarantine until cleared by state vet. We also coordinate the inspections. We already do this, coordinating with the permittee, but we're adding a coordinational piece with the processor or the integrator and sharing this protocol with them and asking them if they have additional requirements they want us to look at. And we would do that if they had them and they were reasonable and we could accommodate them. So that's a changing activity, right? Depending on what the threat level is, how they would respond, what they want their employees to do, we would do the same thing. So one example may be like a shower in, shower out of a facility. We currently don't do that. If that becomes a recommendation or requirement, we would consider that. So we coordinate these inspections with the processors or integrators, make every effort to accommodate the additional PPE or sanitation requirements that set forth by them if we can. our staff won't conduct a poultry inspection if we're sick, right? So any respiratory distress or illness that one of our inspectors have, we're not going to inspect a poultry facility while our staff's experiencing that kind of stuff. And we have a pretty significant washing and disinfecting activity that we beefed up at Ryan's, with Ryan's guidance to basically wash our vehicles prior to any poultry inspection, right? We're only doing one every 72 hours, which we could probably do one Monday and one Friday. So you might be able to do 2 a week. It's probably going to mean you're going to do 1 a week as the operational activity there. But right before, as close to the facility as we can, we're going through the truck wash to wash the vehicle, because the virus is out there in the environment, right? And we're trying to keep the load down as low as we can. We also disinfect the interior of the vehicle. There's a couple of different products that we use. There's a newer aerosol product that just came out that has a shorter contact time. And part of the thing about killing viruses is the strength of the material that you're using and then how long it's in contact with the site to kill it. And so with Virkon, we need a 30-second immersion time, right, of our boots in the liquid to get the kill, to get the 99.99% kill. And this aerosol material has a shorter contact time. And it's pretty easy to use, right? Just comes in the can and you spray it out. So we'll go ahead and pick up that. And then we wash our vehicles pretty frequently. Now we're going to be washing them before the inspections rather than after. And we have a group of PPE, personal protective, equipment that we wear, and that's Tyvek coveralls, Tyvek gloves, hoods, and shoe covers. And so the stuff we have right now is white, so everybody will look like a spacewalker out there on the farm. But that's the PPE level we're going to wear. It's brand new PPE at the time we get on a facility, and when we're done, we take it all off and throw it away. It will be disposed of at the facility. So we won't be hauling dirty PPE around in our vehicles. And then we have a post-inspection disinfectant activity that we're going to do before we get back into the truck and go and leave the site. So we're trying to, like I say, get this approved and reviewed by folks. And once we do, we will likely, if we can get this done, then we will resume those poultry inspections and just kind of watch how that high-path AI disease moves through the system this year in the region and the state. But the prediction is that it will be, pretty persistent all winter long. And now that it's shown that it can be effective in the summer, it will likely be a year-round kind of activity.
Main concern is outdoor flocks, so
The main concern is, right, our poultry facilities that we permit, the vast majority of them are 100% inside the building, so there's not the nexus between a wild bird and a confined bird.
And stuff. So,
yeah,
but still.
But there are, feed trucks coming on the property, and there are employees going in and out of the buildings, and field people from the integrator and the processor going in and out of buildings. And so there is a pathway, right? You just have to manage that.
So what are the symptoms and consequences?
The symptoms in domestic birds is they get lethargic is kind of the first thing, and they just don't behave right. They're droopy and they're not moving. The majority of them die fairly rapidly. They don't live very long. And of course it's in a population, so you don't know, because there's not been huge numbers of the population infected. You don't know. Some of them are probably immune and maybe wouldn't get sick or die. In the wild population, not many die. So they've built up an immunity over time, or there's not a lot of dead. There are a few dead wild birds, but not to the level of domesticated birds. And I think Brian told me that every case in Oregon so far has had at least one duck at the site. That ducks,
beavers, this never would have happened.
Yeah. Ducks seem to be potentially a vector about either attracting, maybe they're an attractant where the ducks fly into their yard and visit for a while and then take off. But it's, yeah, got an interesting disease progression that's very different from what they, what the veterinary and the industry has ever seen before, so.
That's why it could become an endemic if the outdoor population is
Yeah.
resistant to it. Then
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see if the commercial, groups decide to go ahead and develop a vaccine and just make it part of their routine. Commercial chickens are already vaccinated for several different things. And so they have an activity where they do vaccinate birds. All right, any questions or comments on that? I know there was another disease in swine. And so it was a pretty virulent diarrhea bug that was going around in the Midwest. Iowa and Minnesota got hit pretty hard with it. And folks from the University of Iowa and Iowa State went out and they went into Casey's, as the local Iowa convenience store chain, right? There's 500 Casey's stores in Iowa and Minnesota. And so every time they found a Casey's store, they would go into the front door, take 2 steps in and swab the floor with a Q-tip to look for this bovine, or not bovine, but this porcine diarrhea. They found it every single place they sampled. Every single one came back positive. And so that disease is just, ends up just being everywhere. And likely, that could be the same for this bug too. All right. Again, questions or comments on that procedure, other ideas for things that we should do to deal with high-path AI from an inspection, from a vector activity? All right, not hearing anything. Our NPDS, a general permit update, and so there not a lot to talk about there, but a few things of note. So in the Pacific Northwest in Region 10, there are 3 states with NPDS CAFO permits: Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. And all of the states are in the effort to try to reissue their general NPDS permits. Washington issued theirs and got sued. Idaho issued theirs and got sued. We have issued ours and are in the process of responding to comments. Have not yet gotten sued, but want to look at, what other states are doing in response, right? Because some of the questions are similar. So Washington has now put their second permit back to public notice. That comment period's closed and they're responding to those comments. And Idaho is working to, take their permit out to a second round. So some of the mechanism that we're working on is to finish up our response to comments and then look how we might modify the permit. And if we do modify the permit, would those modifications be substantial to the point where we would have to take it back to public notice the second time if we add these things into the permit? So that's the place that we're at in trying to get that work done, and watching and partnering with the other states to see how they're moving forward with their permits. So we'll all kind of in the same boat, right, to try to get this NPDS general permit back out on the ground.
How far out are you looking?
Well, I'd like to, have our agencies to decision point, pretty quickly.
So months.
Yeah, I would say that, yeah, we could. And depending on what the decision is, right? If the decision is, oh, you have to take it, take portions of the permit back to public notice.
Right.
We would set that up and start that.
What changes have you made from the original draft?
Well, some of the questions, kind of the broad questions were, the permit is deficient on the way it monitors discharge from the production area and from land application activities. So if you drill down, like in a production area, if it was a facility with an earth and manure lagoon, how are you going to monitor if that lagoon is discharging to groundwater or not? And so I know we've had, conversation with the industry about, well, what, how could we monitor that if we wanted to monitor it? What, what are the monitoring procedures that are out there that you could use? And what, and what do those look like? The other thing is that, the permit is a discharge permit. It just has an effluent limit of 0. And, so trying to figure out these structural things. Oregon's kind of unique because we have especially in Tillamook, the vast majority of storage facilities there are concrete tanks, right? So the leak detection essentially is the design of the facility. It's not earthen, there's not a design seepage rate in the facility, that it's 0 design. So assessing a concrete above ground tank for leakage is a different activity, right, than a lagoon. And then the other thing is the looking at a way to monitor land application activities. And are the monitoring things that we have in there already, robust enough, or do we need to add to those? So monitoring we currently use our soil testing, right? They got it from the nutrient load, they have to have soil tests. The proposed permit increases the frequency of soil testing because we think that's the way to ascertain nutrient status, right, and determine if there was over applications of nutrients or not from any source. And so what we did is we moved each category permit up 1 notch and said that the large facilities have to sample every field every year. And the post-harvest samplings are done at 1 foot, 3 feet. So from 0 to 12 inches, 24 to 36 inches. And 48 to 60 inches. You have to have a sample from each of those depths on every field every year within the post-harvest
So you
window.
increased it quite a bit on the depth requirement.
Yeah. Some places you can't go that deep because there's not any soil that deep, so there is that. And then for smalls and mediums, we said they were on a once every 5 year sampling. They've moved to what the largest used to be, which is you have to sample at least 20% of your fields every year. So they would have a sampling activity every year. They wouldn't have to sample all their farm every year, but they would have some fields being sampled and data coming in that we could assess every year.
What about the depth for them?
Same depths.
4 feet?
Probably, I think for the small ones, yeah, we follow the EM 8832 guidelines of 1 foot samples. So that's an example of, how you would, they already have a visual monitoring, right? When they're making applications, they're supposed to monitor the applications and make sure there's not runoff. If there is runoff, that's a violation, clear violation of the permit. They're required to report it and take samples.
So the record keeping and all that.
Right.
As far as manure sampling goes, the actual nutrient content of manure, that would be on an annual basis for everybody or only the largest or what?
I think, yeah, I don't know that we necessarily made changes to the manure sampling. But the variability of manure, we definitely want to talk about that. And there are facilities that have super solid feeding programs that just don't change a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And, the breeds and the production are pretty uniform and have been for a long time. Versus other facilities that are implementing a lot of different change more rapidly. And what changes might trigger a more frequent sampling, activity to make sure you got the right number in your, in your nutrient management, agronomic rate calculations.
That's about it then, as far as the.
That's about it. I would say that, OSU extension updated the EM 8832E publication. So Dan Sullivan, right before he retired, he did update that and reduce the number of parts per million of nitrate left in soil that was changed, kept the same ranges, but reduced the part per million number in each of the ranges. And so what that does essentially is say that there's a tighter control over that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that within the something that ODA didn't do, right? That was OSU extension built that, but that was the tool we were using to assess fall nitrate sample results west of the Cascades. And so that will be part of
on this side of the
Yeah.
coast, then we'd stick with the original one.
Yep. Yep. And so that's just kind of an example of some of the things that are either in the permit that we've already taken a notice or things we would put in and then decide, do we need to take those back to notice again, a second time.
Right.
So. Can't think of anything else. I don't know, Zach, do you have any comments on permit development? I know, again, you're new in this role with DEQ.
Wim, no, that was a good recap. And maybe the only thing I would add is of course that DEQ is willing to help out as needed. And Noosh, who's on the line here, and Beth Moore can actively help and participate as requested.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you for that. And yeah, so far their help has been invaluable. I really appreciate the partnership there.
Great. Thanks, Wim.
All right. Anybody else in the room or the audience have comments on the permit activity? I would say this is a little bit of, it's the same topic, but a little bit different. So individual permits, ODA and DEQ are working on some individual permits for facilities, and there are a couple of them that are paused for kind of multiple reasons. One, there's a legal dispute about land ownership on one of the permits, and ODA doesn't feel we can move forward until that's resolved. And then we have a facility that has had continual noncompliance with the general permit. And because of that activity, the agencies decided we're going to issue an individual permit there. And so we're trying to finish that development of that and get that into public notice. So it'll be an existing facility that's on a general NPDES permit. And we're going to require that it move to an individual permit that has additional monitoring requirements because they've had continual discharges from land application activities, and they just don't seem to be able to stop it. So up the monitoring requirement, and hopefully that will have the operator taking a look at the things where it always fails in the exact same way every single time, almost in the same field. So hopefully they can remedy that by getting out and taking a look at it. We're dealing with it before it becomes a problem. All right. Anybody have updates? Industry, agency, partners? Updates on anything that's going on in the world that might affect CAFOs? I did see butter set a record price.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, it set a record, and then it was down a few days, and then it set another record, and then it was down a few days, and then it set a record. Like in a 4 or 5 day period, it set 3 stepwise records.
It's pretty weird.
Yeah. So stock up on butter if it's on sale for your holiday baking needs, because
Class 3's going in.
Huh. All right, not hearing any. One more chance for comments or updates if anybody has it. Any hands raised or anything? Do we see anything in the chat? Nope. Okay. All right. Last thing is public comments. If anybody from the public has comments, we can take those now. If you'll just introduce yourself, then we'll have your name for the record.
Brian Posewitz.
Brian, are you going to make a comment for us, Brian?
I have some questions more than comments. Is that okay?
Yeah, let's ask the group to see if they have comments first.
Okay,
Then I can, if you don't mind, then I can return to you for questions.
no problem. I'll stand down.
All right, final ask if anybody would like to make public comments into the record. All right, Brian, the floor is yours for questions.
Oh, yeah, you may have alluded to this, and sorry if I just didn't quite catch it all, but can you give us an update on the Easter Day dairy application? Is that still pending with ODA? And I'm interested in particular in what, if anything, you know about the property ownership of the dairy site. Is that still under Easter Day Dairy LLC or whatever it's called? And then also whether anything's being done as far as you know on water supply to that area or any of the other CAFOs in that area.
Sure. So on the Easter Day, yeah. So there is a current zero animal NPDS there. It's described as a cleanup permit. It's in Easter Day Dairy LLC's name. It allows them to, to maintain the existing waste facility. However, it does not allow them to have any animals and operate a dairy or a feedlot. And so they made application to ODA and DEQ for an individual permit to bring dairy cows back on. That activity, that drafting activity of ODA and DEQ drafting the individual permit is paused because of questions about land ownership that have to resolve themselves, legally before we can move forward. And I'm not aware of any work that they have done about water supply issues over there, other than what's currently pending with the Water Resources Department. At least our agency hasn't seen anything new in the last several months on that activity there from Easter Day.
Okay, yeah, so thanks for that. And then if you don't mind, I also had a really detailed question, I guess, or maybe getting down to the minutia too much on that sort of CAFO spreadsheet that the department keeps that we periodically get by public records requests here and there. And just in terms of interpreting that data, I'm wondering, there's a column for permitted animals and total animals, and I'm wondering if you could just tell us what the difference is in those two columns, and then I'm also wondering why some of the tier 1 dairies are permitted for more than 2,500 cows, when I thought that was the break between tier 1 and tier 2.
Sure. And yeah, you're right, Brian. Yeah, this is kind of down in the weeds, but hopefully folks will bear with me, and Christy can chime in as well because she puts together these reports. So in the NPDS world, and we just adopted this straight across into Oregon, there are two types of CAFO permits that describe the herd, right? So swine permits describe two different classes of animals and assign different numbers to each class. You total that class of numbers, and then that's the total permitted number. Dairy does the same thing. So they have two classes, mature animals, which are milking and dry cows, and then immature animals. So these are animals that have never been milked, are defined as heifers and calves. So for a dairy that has a total permitted number of 10,000 animals, they could have a herd that would consist of 5,000 milking and dry cows and 5,000 heifers and calves. And so that would be a large facility, but that's what the breakdown would be. A lot of times in reporting, we'll report not the last inspection that our staff did. That's a question. And we usually get a computer printout from them about here's the animals that are on the site today. That number is always different. Many times it is less than the maximum permitted number. We have facilities that run, some of them run 50% less, at less capacity than their maximum permitted number. The last thing was a dairy that has a permitted number of greater than 2,500, but is not defined as a tier 2 large. So that's likely a dairy that, because the tiers are for the mature animals, not for the heifers and calves. So you may have a facility that has, we have some facilities where they custom feed heifers for another farm, and they may have 3 or 4 times the number of heifers than they do mature cows of their own. So if they had 1,000 mature animals and 1,500 heifers and calves, that heifers and calf number may be larger than the milking cows, because the controlling number there is the mature animals. It wouldn't fall into that large tier 2 category yet. So that's why we report kind of several different numbers, because you have to slice it different ways for different questions, right? If it's a tier 1 or tier 2, and that tier 1 and tier 2, is a recent development for the agency. It used to be that anytime you had more than 700 milking or dry cows on the facility, you were a large, and a large went from 700 to, essentially to infinity. Now with the tiers, which started out to be a division for a fee activity, that's why we created those numbers to have larger fees for bigger facilities.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Other questions, comments? Again, I would throw out, because we're wrapping up for this year now, if folks have agenda items that they would like to see at our April meeting or any of the meetings in 2023, feel free to send those in to Amanda, Christy, or I, and we'll do our best to get those on the agenda. If you want topics that you'd like to be presented, that we need folks outside of ODA or folks in other ODA programs, we can work on that as well. And see if we can, build the agenda out. So please send those to me if you have any ideas for that. And thanks all for your participation. I guess I'd end with we still do have an open position for a public member, and working on trying to expand our advertisement for that. It's been on our website, and we've reached out to all of our tribal partners that we've had here for the last couple of years, and others. I've asked our citizen advocate to try to take another shot at that and reach out again. There's not a really good definition about the public member, but the agency has always felt that the public member, would not operate a livestock facility, whether it be permitted or not. And so that's kind of our controlling item when we're looking to try to fill that seat. So we do currently have a vacancy there. If anybody knows of somebody who would meet that guidance and be interested in participating, we'd appreciate sending them forward. We just need a simple letter of interest, and then that gets reviewed by our director. And like to start next year with a full committee. So if you have any person in mind, send that forward, please. All right, well, thank you all. I'm gonna return an hour back to you. And unless there are other questions or comments, have a great rest of the year.
Thanks, Wim.
Thank you, Wim.
Hey, Carol.
Thanks, Wim.
Good evening.